Basu Godin Notebook. 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 Okay, everybody, welcome to the Basu and Godin Notebook on Friday, October 25th. Arpin, you're back into your usual confines. So am I.
Yeah.
After another episode broadcasted from the Bell Center, and we're home because the Canadiens have not been playing. They've had a quiet week so far. They played on Tuesday. They play again on Saturday against the St. Louis Blues. And this window here, those 3 days, the Canadiens took a day off on Thursday, but the practice on Wednesday and the practice on Friday is seen within the Canadiens' room as a golden opportunity to fix some things that have gone wrong for them so far in the season. And it's an opportunity that, that they don't get very often when you look at their schedule. And considering the way things have gone so far, it comes at a very opportune time.
Yeah, well, I mean, their schedule from now on gets very hectic again. So you do have these little pockets in the season. The D-zone stuff that they worked on over the last 3 days, or two, I guess, for the players, but three for the coaching staff, comes in, had been a problem prior to the Rangers game. So in a sense, and was something that Marty identified as a problem prior to the Rangers game. So in a sense, what happened in the Rangers game, I think you have to hope, served as a massive wake-up call for the players. And, you shouldn't need a result like that to understand that you're not doing, there's one aspect of the game that's really slipping and is not up to snuff. But sometimes that could be the byproduct of a result like that, getting spanked, getting humbled, as Marty mentioned after the game, can bring some people back down to earth. And I think that there's, we're going to talk about this defensive zone stuff. We're going to kind of get into the nitty gritty of it a little bit here. We get a lot of questions on the hybrid defensive system that Marty employs. He was questioned on it today, quite directly by Anthony Martineau of TVA Sport, which I was thankful for, because I was going to ask him the same question and I could ask him something different when it was my turn. But, challenged him on, is this the right system for the players that you have, basically? And Marty kind of was the beginning of a sort of a defiant session with the media, saying that, well, this is where the NHL is going. And whether my players, well, no matter what my players, if that's where the league is going, that's where we should be going. And, in theory, not even in theory, in practicality, he's right. If the game is going in a certain direction, sticking to what is the old way of playing is probably not the way to go. However, it's been clear that there are some of his players that are having a lot of trouble grasping the nuances of the hybrid system. Normally, I just do a quick explainer of what the system is before we get into it, or would you like to handle that?
No, sure, go. I'll add stuff once you're done.
It's actually not that complicated to describe, right? It's high ice. I used to talk about this with Jonathan Kovacevic a lot last season, and he was really good about high ice. There's a lot of space up there, and so taking too many chances up there doesn't make a lot of sense. So you stick with man-to-man. When the puck goes to low ice, below the hash marks or below, you switch to more of a zone scheme, and more so than zone, it's kind of it's a pressure scheme, basically. Like you're trying to find moments when the puck is low where you can double team a guy, create an on-man situation in your favor, and get the puck back quickly. So what happens is, and what's been happening to the Canadiens is, those pressure points are not being recognized by the players quickly enough. So those moments where they got to go and create a double team or a 3-on-2 or whatever the case may be, create that odd man, that numerical advantage. Players aren't catching on to those quickly enough. And B, when that happens, that means the puck kind of stays in your end longer, goes from low to high and high to low. And the longer it does that, the more confusion it creates because you're going from man to zone to man to zone to man to zone, and eventually you're going to get lost in there. So, but at its base, that's it. It's not actually that complicated. But in reality, playing at NHL speed against NHL players, it can get complicated because if you don't get the desired result when the puck is low, it can lead to confusion and it can lead to extended zone time, which leads to more confusion and becomes a vicious circle. So that's kind of the nuts and bolts of the hybrid system.
Yeah. So the Canadiens they identified that they don't put enough pressure on the opponent when they enter the zone. They let them in. So they give the blue line a lot. So they need first to kill more plays at the blue line. If for some reason that is not done, then it's got to be done at the hash mark. You apply pressure at the hash mark. And if not, then the third layer is down low. But it's crucial that the Canadiens regain possession down low, because what the Canadiens don't want to do is end up in the man-to-man situation of the opponent having the puck back up ice, like at the offensive blue line, starting their cycling, and then the Canadiens ending up in a situation where they don't want to be. The fact that they go back to man up ice is because when the puck moves, it's the easiest and fastest way to reorganize and redeploy, but it's not necessarily the most effective, and they feel as though they don't want to get caught in that situation. So it's super important that they regain possession based on those numerical advantages when it's behind the goal line. So that's why there's been some instances that turned into goals against, where you had a guy leaving his position thinking, I'm going to go help my teammate so that we make sure that we regain possession. They don't. And all of a sudden there's a guy that's left alone in the front, and it turns into a goal. I remember there's a game where David Savard did that. The guys, his forwards in the front of the net were not quite backed up enough so that they could cover for him, but he didn't take the proper read, and he jumped into going to help Arbor Jacki right away. That was the game before his 800 game. So that must have been like about 10 days ago. So that was a situation. I think that you mentioned, you spoke to Newhook also. You tried to make him remember a certain play against LA, where I think there was something similar to happen. But so they don't want to redeploy as a man-to-man, because, as you say, man-to-man is a type of defense that's falling out of favor. So more and more teams are doing the hybrid system. Some of them, I wouldn't know exactly the right number, but a lot of them are doing zone. So it's a choice between one and the other. Probably that for a young blue line such as the Canadiens, doing strictly man-to-man would probably be the easiest to process. But Martin Saint-Louis knows that it's the one that would create the worst results. So being in the development phase where the Canadiens are rebuilding, they have a lot of young defensemen. Their point is to say, well, we believe in that system, so we're going to implement now that what we believe in. We're going to teach it to young defensemen, and as they grow older, they're going to get familiar with it, and it's going to be well installed when they become mature enough. Crazy thing is that it's not so crazy, but yeah, the part that's crazy is that in Laval, it was not taught before this season. So you got a guy like Arbor Jacki who's new to that. To a certain extent, Jaden Struble is new to that. And Logan Mailloux is new to that. Not to mention that when he played in London, it was also man-to-man. Lane Hudson's new to that. So you got the youngest blue line in the NHL trying to implement a system that's based on reads and on a high hockey IQ. So you're facing world-class competition, guys that are super smart, skilled, big, fast, and you're asked to produce results right away. There's going to be bumps on the road, and that's what we're seeing right now.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I talked to Logan about that, just the switch from man to man to this hybrid, and how, it did help him that he was in training camp with Laval, and that Pascal Vincent is teaching that system in Laval right now. So he did come out of that environment into this environment, which was an easier transition than it would have been last year, where it was a straight man to man scheme. But he, just admitted that the reads aren't quite there. They're not on point. And my thing is that if you watch them play in the defensive zone right now, it looks like they're making mistakes all over the place and they're really glaring, but they actually they're actually not that many mistakes. It's just that when they make them, they're terrible. Like they're leaving guys open in really high danger areas. So it seems like that's constant because they're doing that with a greater level of frequency than you should be giving up chances like that. But generally, if you watch them, it's actually been that they're too cautious and that they're not creating that pressure. So they're creating a bit of a shell. And, that famous long shift against the Islanders, the 4-minute shift, Marty mentioned it, that yes, it was a long shift, but we didn't give them anything. And I think that's what's in the player's mind right now. Like, let's not give up anything. So let's err on the side of caution. Where I think the adjustment Marty's trying to make is to get them to think like, let's err on the side of aggression. Let's err on the side of, let's go for the pressure play. And if someone's left open as a result because we're not able to kill the play, well, we'll live with that because at least we're our head's in the right space in terms of what this system is supposed to produce, and then we'll get better at it. But at least we're doing the right thing. Now we just need to get better at doing that thing. And so, but for a player like Mayu, I'm sorry, I keep saying this wrong. Mayu. His name is pronounced Mayu. I keep reverting to the French pronunciation of the name. He pronounces his name Logan Mayu. When it comes to Mayu, he's trying to establish himself in the NHL. He's on the bubble right now. And so when you're actually in the heat of action, it's easy for us to say, well, just go pressure the guy, don't worry about it. Like when the system is based on you pressuring that guy. Well, when you're playing in an NHL game and you sense that you're leaving a dangerous area of the ice to go apply pressure behind your own net, every instinct in your body tells you that that's the wrong move, that that's not what you're supposed to be doing. I should be defending the inner slot in front of my own net as opposed to going behind the net to try and create a turnover. And that's where the evolution of the game is happening. And that's where, that's the adjustment that needs to be made, where guys are naturally wired to play cautiously. And the system is designed to throw caution to the wind a little bit and just trust your ability to create a turnover. It's kind of like a blitz in football in the sense that you can choose to send 4 men on a pass rush and load up your defensive backfield and defend and make sure that no one's open. Or you can throw 2 of your DBs and a linebacker and send them after the quarterback and force him into a mistake, either a sack or an interception or whatever. It's kind of the same principle. And right now the Canadiens are kind of defaulting to sitting back in like a nickel defense and just kind of defending the pass instead of actually being aggressive on the quarterback and trying to force a mistake.
Yeah, but it's not as much throwing caution out of the window than just being assertive and know decisively what you need to do. And I think that's the hesitation of, am I going or not? Or is it the right move? That split second that has been costly for many guys. I think Jack Guy has been proven guilty of that early on in the season. And as a result, he sat for the last couple of games. Uh-huh. I think it's that hesitation that really, costs them dearly. And Nick Suzuki was saying, we got so many young defensemen that when you say that they sort of sit back, the reflex to hold back and just to protect is because you don't want to make a mistake. You're trying to get your a regular spot in the NHL. You want to show that you can be reliable. So you're not going to go out and do something stupid. But Suzuki said the irony there is that if you just sit back, eventually mistakes are going to come because you need to apply that pressure. Otherwise, you're going to be swarmed. You're going to be strangled by an opponent, and we saw it with the Rangers, where you end up spending so much time in your own end because you don't apply that pressure at the right time, and you end up just being there watching and just hoping for it to end, hoping for a whistle or a clear. But all that time that the Canadiens spend defending that way and being hesitant and prudent, not only do they just hold on for dear life that they're not going to get scored against, but they're not attacking. So it's really, I think it's part of the maturation process for them that they need to go through, that they get rid of that hesitation and it becomes second nature for them. And I rarely saw Martin St. Louis being so definitive and assertive in saying those guys who cannot understand it, those guys who cannot identify what's black from white in certain situations, they're not cut out to play in this league. And they're going to eventually, they're going to make mistakes and they're going to have their ice time decreased. So talking in those terms, it's not exactly the Martin St. Louis that we've seen in the past, but I think that he tries to, I think that everybody acknowledges that it's a young team, that they have to go through that process, but at some point, it's those who have a higher IQ that can make the faster reads and make those decisions and the right decisions faster, that at the end of the day will end up being the ones playing on a regular basis in that blue line.
Which is why I said throw caution to the wind, like because it goes against every instinct the defenseman has to leave that valuable ice for what is conventionally considered to be less valuable ice and try and make a play there. And that's the instinct that they need to, that it needs to be second nature to them, that I am not only allowed to leave this ice and go to that ice, I am expected to leave this ice and go to that ice. I'm expected to leave the front of the net if the situation warrants it and go and kill that play, help my teammate kill that play behind the net so we can get the puck back. That goes against everything most of these defensemen were taught their entire lives. It's counterintuitive to what they've known. And I think this would apply to veterans too, but I think they're more, when you've been in the NHL a while, you're more open to new concepts and new ways of seeing the game, and you're more adaptable to the way the game is trending than if you're a defenseman who, in Mayu's case, played man-to-man in Laval last year. Like in no world where you're playing a man-to-man defensive system would you leave the front of the net to go to the to behind the net and defend there and leave your guy alone in front. It's just not. Whereas here, there are instances where if you see a vulnerability, it's a question of attacking that vulnerability and getting it done sooner than the opposing player can see that you've left your man or you've left a man alone in front. So it's, again, that blitz mentality where I'm going to blitz you, and yeah, there might be a guy open deep downfield, but I'm going to give the quarterback so little time to find him that it won't matter. That we can live with that guy being open. We're going to take away the time and space of the quarterback and sack him or force him to get rid of the ball before that guy can even get open. So it's I really see it in the same vein. And NFL defenses, there's waves of trends and tendencies in the NFL too, or heavy blitzing against less blitzing and what have you, and all these different schemes. And this is, I think, a bit of that. Like they want to blitz early in a possession to get the puck back, and it hasn't been working out that way. And I think the reason why Marty's behaving was saying those things the way he was, which I agree we haven't heard, is instead of the players getting a lot of the blame for being unable to execute the system's getting the blame. And to him, he's like, this is the way the league is going. Don't blame the system.
The Stanley Cup champions won. The Panthers won using that
this system. Exactly. And so, the reason, what makes Martin St. Louis so appealing as a coach is how modern he is, right? Is how in tune he is with where the game is heading at all times. And so, and listen, I've made the argument that if your players can't execute the system that you're asking them to play, maybe at some point, and I still feel this way to some extent, like at some point this season, I don't think it's now, but at some point this season, if his players consistently show an inability to make the reads necessary to play this system, and if he has expectations and the organization has expectations and the owner has expectations and the market has expectations that you're going to win more games this year, then that might be a concession he has to make. And I feel after what he said on Friday, there's no way he's going to make that concession. Like no matter what happens with the wins or losses, and he might be right. It might be that the Canadiens in the long run will be better off by him sticking to his guns on this. But it's definitely going to be a factor in determining who's going to play defense on this team moving forward. And the evaluation points are become different. Mm-hmm. You look at a guy like Jacky. Jacky has everything you would want in today's game in the sense that his feet are pretty good, booming shot, decent puck mover, punishing physically, and obviously he can fight. And so he provides an element that is disappearing in the NHL. But his inability to make these reads at the right times is costing him right now. And the pressure's on him tomorrow night. He's back in against the Blues on Saturday. And Marty was pretty blunt about it. Like, I expect to see a better version of Arber Xhekaj, but to him, the better version of Arber Xhekaj is his ability to execute this defensive zone system and applying pressure. And I think if it was
remaining aware, and be on his
alert.
toes all the time.
Yeah, on high alert is a term.
Yeah.
So I think it's a general problem, though. It's not only him; it's a general problem for the Canadiens that they're not alert enough to potential opportunities to get the puck back, and they sit back or they draw back to their basic instinct of defend the house. Which, I might add, when Marty said that they attacked the defensive zone on day one of training camp, we just made a few tweaks to what we did last year. The major tweak that they made was to defend the house. They wanted to always have a man in the home plate area, low in the home plate area in front of the net. They did not want to leave that part of the ice empty. So that's what makes it complicated when you have to leave that area of the ice to go kill a play. So on the one hand, you're being told to pressure the puck and create turnovers. On the other hand, you're being told to protect the house at all costs. Something's got to give. And so there's a chain reaction there. So if the guy who's protecting the house has to go behind the net and kill the play, someone else has to recognize that and be the guy who replaces that man in the house. And so it actually added a layer of complication to this whole thing that I think a lot of the players are also having a little bit of trouble adjusting to.
You were mentioning expectations from the owner, management and the fans, obviously. So the whole in the mix thing. Mm-hmm. There's something I want to add about that I really noticed this week. When I asked Marty about expected goals against, and he gave me an answer, and the day after he came back and he had thought about it further, obviously, and he wanted to make sure to mention and underline the fact that it was too early to jump to conclusions when it came to data.
Can I just give the proof that he had thought about it earlier? The proof that he had thought about it earlier was that he knew the exact percentage of games that they had played in the NHL season. He knew exactly what that percentage represented in the NFL to the decimal point. He said it represents 1.2 games in an NFL season. I looked it up. It's 1.24. Like he did the math before. So yes, he thought about it for sure after your question.
Yeah. So he said, I don't look at the data yet. I use my eyes. And you asked him, you said, what do your eyes tell you? Mm-hmm. And he said, my eyes tell me that we're getting better, that there are certain things that I've been asking them to do that they're applying. And there are, things in the defensive zone or in rush coverage that we're getting better at.
Yeah, it shows, he says.
It shows.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to argue whether what he's seeing is right or wrong, but what I can say pretty surely is that he sees his eyes, what he sees are through the lenses of a guy who has a team in development. For him to say we're getting better, it's because firmly entrenched in the development stage of this team, in the teaching aspect of it. So the whole thing about heightened expectations, being in the mix, knocking at the door of the playoffs, he cannot on a daily basis. He's not there yet because his eyes tells him that considering where they're starting from and where they intend to go, what everybody considers to be at this point, like, I don't know if a sinking ship is the right expression, but certainly something that needs real fixing.
It's leaking right now. Yes,
He sees improvement. So, and that's fine, but it's all based on expectations because it's the eyes of last year's coach who was still having a very young and developing team, and basically that's still where they are.
Yeah, but he himself said that he is going to be more demanding on details this year, and I think honestly, Friday we saw proof of that. His defiance in defending the system and putting the onus to execute that system on the players, and basically refusing to make any adjustments on his end. That's proof of that.
Well, yeah, he cannot throw out the system out the window after.
You don't have to throw it out completely, but you can make adjustments where you could, if you see areas of your defensive game that players are clearly unable to execute. When you're in, this is the difference. So when you're in a win now mode, or when you actually have to make the playoffs that year, you have a greater, let's say, motivation, or you're more inclined to make those tweaks so that you can win the next game. Whereas when you're in a development mode, and I agree with you 100% that Marty is still in development mode, you're not inclined to make those changes. You're like, no, you guys are young. You remember the thing about learning a language when you're younger? These kids should be able to learn this because they're in the NHL now. And this is the standard in the NHL. You need to be able to play a system, so you're going to play my system. And that's all there is to it. And if it costs us a few more games, then so be it. We'll be better for it in the long run.
Yeah, but if they made tweaks that you just described, about leaving a guy in the house, making sure that part is covered, they played 7 regular season games with those tweaks. So I can understand a head coach to say, before we make other tweaks, let's try to make sure that what we've changed and what we want to implement, they get it right. After game 25, it's still not the case. Maybe that he's going to be looking for other sets of tweaks. And that's not to mention all the tiny tweaks that can be done from day to day that maybe most people won't see.
Yeah, but when I was talking about tweaks, I would mean removing layers, simplifying a little bit. That's what I mean, because that's clearly what his players probably need right now. Is a tiny bit of, they need gray removed. And it's funny, Marty just a few days ago was talking about how much gray there is, and certain face-offs are black and white, he said back then, but a lot of D-zone is gray. Today, what did he say? He said when it's black and white, when it's black and white, you got to make the decision. So that gray to him is way less in the D-zone based on what he's asking them to do. And I think that has to do with just how much he has shown them. The video sessions the last few practices apparently were quite extensive, and there were lots of examples of their play in the defensive zone. So I think in Marty's eyes, he's giving them the tools for that to be less gray. He's giving them the tools to make it black and white. What I would be fearing is if he's given them so many tools that it almost has a counter effect, where it actually leads you more to gray because you're trying to remember all the cues. I talked to Jack Guy about this a while ago, and he mentioned something about how they basically have a cheat sheet, and it's just kind of a series of game situations that happen regularly, and in this situation in this area of the ice, this is generally what you should do. And it's just kind of a set of guidelines. Yeah. Well, if you look at it as just a set of guidelines as a way to kind of do like machine learning kind of, like just kind of take in information and add it to your repertoire that you can access at the snap of a finger during a game, great. But if you're actually thinking about that list on the ice, when you see a situation, you're like, oh, I'm supposed to do this. It's too late. It's too late. You've missed the window of what to do in that situation because you had to think about it. And so
Josh Anderson was going through a similar list in his head last year too, no?
yeah, and he's largely gotten rid of it, and it's improved his play. And so I think some players, and again, Marty mentioned it today, some players need to do it on the ice, some players need to be shown on video, and some players need to be told. Well, some players also don't do well with an overload of information. So I don't know what's the teaching that's going on behind the scenes, but I would argue that a guy like Arbor Xhekaj does not learn how to play in the defensive zone the same way as a guy like Mike Matheson does, or even if you want to pick a younger guy, Caden Gooley does. He needs to do it differently, and he needs different ways to get to black and white instead of constantly living in gray, which is where he's been living pretty much all season so far.
Okay, so you mentioned Caden Gooley. Caden Gooley's out. He's still not skating. He hasn't started skating yet.
No.
Doesn't look too good. Justin Barron is not skating yet. So I think that
he skated this morning.
He did? Okay,
yeah,
I was not.
He skated before practice this morning, yes.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah,
good.
He's the only one who did.
So, but those two guys are out, obviously, next game against St. Louis. Those two guys were on the Canadiens' top 6 on defense to start the season, and they have been replaced by guys who have even less NHL experience than they do. So is it very surprising that we've started hearing rumblings that the Canadiens are on the phone trying to shop for a right-handed defenseman, probably a more experienced defenseman to help stabilizing things? I don't know where I heard that before. I don't know who.
Do you think they called New Jersey?
For Kovacevic?
For Brett Pesce.
For Brett Pesce?
Yeah, right.
Well,
Well, for Kovacevic too.
I mean, I cannot say that. I hammered that point last season, and I'll still with new names for the upcoming off season, but still, it is. We've come to that point, and how much credence? I don't know if they're. I don't see how they can really pull that off at this time of the year without getting fleeced, because everybody knows that that's a primary short-term need for them. Structurally, it might be a longer-term need, but the urge to have it done now puts them in a very weak negotiating spot. So I don't see how you can both get a top 4 defenseman, plays on the right side, whether he's a lefty or righty, but who plays on the right side without touching your future. I mean,
well, I would add some nuance to that. I know that, our buddy Pierre Lebrun kind of mentioned in his report that they don't want to mortgage the future. I would add that I don't think Canadiens management looks at their bank of draft picks right now as being a huge part of their future. I think they see it more as a part of their present and an ability to acquire players using those picks. And so that, I think, is kind of the distinction to be made there. When they say they don't want to sacrifice their future, I think they would largely mean their young players, their prospects, the people that are in the system. But those draft picks, I know that they look at those as currency, and not currency at the draft, but currency in the trade market. So it would not shock me. And the other thing that we've seen with the Canadiens is they're not afraid to overpay using draft picks. I think even the Canadiens recognize to some extent that the price for Newhook, which was a late first and an early second, that was a bit of an overpay. But they had no problem doing it because they had lots of picks and they have lots of prospects. And what they needed was a guy like Newhook. And we'll see if Newhook pans out and how he works out. But that was the calculation that they made. And it wouldn't shock me in the least if they had to overpay using draft picks to get someone that could help them, and ideally not just now, but even going into next year, and just serve as a bridge for that sort of those disconnected windows we were talking about in a previous episode, where the defense is so young and they generally need more time to get to full maturity. If you can get some bridge guys in there, um, I could see them being willing to part with an extra pick that makes it an overpay. It won't bother them because they'll be filling a need that they have right now. And the other aspect of that is Kent Hughes saying at the golf tournament that we're out of the asset acquisition phase and into the team building phase, which just means that the things that they do will be based more on specific needs within the lineup or holes within the organization that need to be plugged. And if the early part of this season, what have we said about this season? That it's a season where they're going to gather information, right? And so what's the information they've been gathering? Well, Arbor Xhekaj is having trouble grasping the defensive zone system. Justin Barron's been up and down and might not be a long-term solution, let's say, on the right side, but that's in a very short sample. I think there's a lot of young guys that are providing that information that the Canadiens are seeking. And so,
there's
I'm not,
yeah.
well, I'm not sure. Just because Kent Hughes is making calls right now, I don't think that means that they're desperate to make a trade right now. But these trades take time. You have to know what the prices are before you even start considering a trade. And oftentimes trades made at the deadline, they start percolating around U.S. Thanksgiving. So Kent Hughes is jumping the gun by like 2 weeks, 3 weeks. It's not really. It's normally that's the time where GMs start calling and being like, "Hey, what would it take to get this guy? What would it take to get that guy?" Well, I think because of the slow start of his team, it's quite naturally he's just starting that process a little earlier. But that process often takes weeks, if not months, to come to completion.
So there was a listener on our in our chat in our Substack, and once again, I would like to invite people to exchange. There's a little community that's building there, and I really like what I read. Someone was mentioning, and we didn't address it in our Monday mailbag, but someone was mentioning, do you see a world where the Canadiens could use the pick that they got in the Sean Monahan trade in order to fix something internally? So that really goes into that.
Yeah.
That idea. So probably I don't see the Canadiens getting rid of their own first round pick, because who knows, it might be a very, very high pick. But the Flames, anyway, we won't go into all those conditions, because it could be a Flames pick, it could be also a Florida Panthers pick. But there's a first round pick in there for 2025 that could be dangled, that is not attached to the Canadiens, but is owned by the Canadiens, that could be maybe used as currency to get some help.
Yeah, the Flames getting off to such a sick start is actually a really them getting off to like the super hot start, one of the best starts in franchise history. Like that pick is kind of in the cards there. that pick, where that pick lands, depends greatly on basically if Calgary finishes with a top 10 pick, then the pick becomes the Panthers, I think it is. And so anyhow. That goes. Yeah. Let's not get into that. But yes, but I do think, depending on the player that would be coming back, like I don't think that pick is untouchable. Personally, like it's not untouchable. It would take a lot. It would have to be a significant piece coming the other way. But I don't think that pick's untouchable. Far from it. As a matter of fact, I mean they have 2 picks in each of the first 4 rounds, if I'm not mistaken. So there's a lot of inventory there. No, they have 3 picks in the 3rd round. Sorry. So they have 2 in the first, 2 in the second, 3 in the 3rd, 2 in the 4th. There's a lot of inventory there, and they're not going to be afraid to use it.
No, and they're going to gather more at the trade deadline if things don't get better, because they're going to be sellers. So they're going to have even more picks. So no, you want to pick,
Well,
okay. So the other thing is, I want to go back to Martin St-Louis and his availability on Friday, because I heard him say something I don't think I've heard before. He was asked about the Montreal market and the fact that we've all heard the rumblings among the fan base and on the radio, some of our commentator colleagues, they're not journalists, but they're commentators because they're not coming. No, it's true. I mean,
Yeah, it's true.
there's a nuance there.
Uh-huh.
I hate where the media is just one big blob and everybody goes into the same. Yeah.
Bucket. Yeah. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. Marc-Antoine, don't get started on that. So anyway, so Marty was asked about the market and saying, well, when you have 3 days off in between games and there's a lot of chatter that'll build up based on, after a bad loss, such as the one against the Rangers. And he said, what do you make of it when basically you're being challenged? I'm paraphrasing here. And so,
well, no, it's important to get this. The question was from Eric Engels of Sportsnet. The question was, how do you prepare your players to deal with that? He was specifically about the players that he was asking the question.
And Martin, he did not make it about the players.
Well,
he made it about
point.
Himself.
That's the point. That's what made it even stronger what he said, because he was asked about the players. Anyhow, sorry, continue.
Yeah. So, but you wrote down the quote to how he replied.
Well, the first part of how he replied is actually something Aaron Rodgers said, the quarterback of the New York Jets. He said it about a week ago, and it was something like, why would I take criticism from someone who I wouldn't ask for advice, and Aaron Rodgers said that, and he said, he learned that when he was 38 and he wished he knew that when he was 15 and all this stuff. So anyhow, Marty repeated it, which he tends to do. He tends to, like, when he hears something he likes, he tends to repeat it. Yeah. But the quote, after like a bit more prodding, was, I usually overcome the obstacles and the people that doubt me. So I appreciate the market. It's pretty hot.
So, pretty hot, and this is the part that's new, because there's been a honeymoon with Martin St-Louis, the colorful language, the images, and all that, the role model, everything is
citation savoureuse.
Huh? Yeah, everything has been positive surrounding Martin St-Louis, but now with the shift in expectations, and you can see the testy level of patience from the fans. Uh-huh. There are some that are starting to turn on him, and that's where he says that it basically being doubted is going to fuel him. So that's what happened. That's what drove him as a player, and that's what made him a Hall of Fame player. So I thought it was interesting that he says basically, oh yeah, people are going to try to second guess me on my ability as a coach. Now let me show you. And it's a new phase of Martin St-Louis as a head coach in Montreal, because he had not had to deal with that public discourse. Whether he really listens to it or not, he knows that it's there. I'm sure that he's fully aware.
He listens to it. So don't let him convince you otherwise. He does.
So it's
probably listens to this podcast. He's going to find this very funny when he listens to it at some point.
Yeah. I won't check if he does. And once again, Marty, if you're listening, va faire autre chose, man.
Yeah, that's it. But I think it is. But listen, going into the season, this was one of my biggest curiosities. Like, how is he going to handle it when invariably at some point this season, this was going to happen? The fact that it's happening in late October, like less than a month into the season, is the mildly surprising part. But it was going to happen at some point. They were going to go on a losing streak. He was going to get questioned, and it was going to the tone of his dealings with us was going to change. And how is he going to react? And now I think Friday we got the first real taste of it. We got like a mini taste of it when the whole proactive thing happened. That was like,
well, no. That's just him being a bit testy with your question. But we've taken turns. He's been short with us once in a while. Everybody has.
But that was a question that was, the reason why I say that is because it was a question that was challenging his decision making. He's being challenged on his coaching chops, which everyone knew entering the job. He's not an experienced coach, but now he's in year 3. I mean, it's he's not a rookie
He's
coach anymore.
no, he's got the 6th oldest tenure
Exactly,
behind an NHL bench.
behind an NHL bench. So this was the curiosity: is how is Martin going to handle a normal environment for a Canadiens coach? Because what he's experienced until now has been abnormal. Because the Canadiens have never openly stated that they're going to go through a rebuild. They have never basically openly stated we are going to lose for a given amount of time. So Marty got the benefit of the doubt with that. He's working within those parameters. So you can't, when a team loses and they told you at the beginning of the season that they're going to lose, you can't really call out the coach for losing. It's like an organizational strategy. You can't really, and you look at the personnel and everything and you're like, yeah, okay, well, they're not winning. And so you look, from my point of view, and I think from yours as well, you look for areas of improvement. You look for what is the future going to look like if things continue going down this path. So when you make the goal more immediate and say we expect to see actual move up the standings this season to whatever degree you want to decide in the mix means, in the mix can mean like finish 12th in the conference or 13th in the, I mean, it's like, it doesn't necessarily mean being on the cusp of the play. It's very open to interpretation, which is, I think, the beauty of the term is that it's extremely vague and meaningless. But it means we have to move up the standings. So there are now expectations on the team, placed by the team, to have different results, not perfect results, but different. And when you lose 4 games in a row, albeit the game against the Islanders, they lose in a shootout in the 9th round. I don't think it's fair to loop that in with the other losses, but the other losses in that streak were not very impressive.
No.
And frankly, their 2 wins, only one of them was really a win. Like, I mean, I don't know. I don't consider opening night against Toronto, giving up 48 shots and having a Sam Montembeault miracle, as like being a really convincing win on opening night. So when that happens and you've set the bar at a certain place and you set expectations at a certain place, the expectations on Marty have changed. He's expected to produce some degree of results this year. And it's only normal that when you're not producing those results that you're going to get challenged. And now we're getting a taste of him punching back. I kind of liked it. I enjoyed it. It was fun.
But do you think that they can, usually when we say the expression, we use the expression putting the genie back in the bottle, it's never possible. But in this case, do you think that they could scale back a bit and go back to acknowledging that they're a rebuilding team or that they're in a development phase and that they don't, and basically aiming for being relevant in March and winning X number of games or whatever target they had is possibly a pipe dream, not only because of the learning aspect of it, but also because of injuries, because
Patrick Laine is not there. Patrick Laine was baked into that in the mix goal. Ken Hughes said it the day he acquired him. He said, when I said I wanted to be in the mix, that included adding an offensive impact player. So they already have a baked-in excuse.
Laine's not there. Slavkovsky's not there. Goulet's not there. It's 3 big pieces right there.
Right. So, which is why this is where it's going to get tricky, because I still think the way the Canadiens play has to match the way the coach wants them to play. And if they're unable to play, this goes back to the defensive zone stuff, but it applies to a lot of other things. The forecheck, any other aspect of the game that he's trying to implement. We listened to him for 3 straight days talk about playing a deep game. 4 straight days. It took forever for the Canadiens to actually listen to their coach and play a deep game. That's when you start to question, is the coach's message getting through? When the D-zone stuff continues to be an issue, when day 1 of training camp was devoted to it, that was over a month ago. And it's still an issue. And guys still have trouble executing it and picking it up. The message isn't getting through. That's kind of the coach's job. And listen, he does not have the ideal personnel, and no one makes any illusions that this should be this world-beating team. But when you're a coach, you have a game plan. you have to teach your players how to implement it, and then they have to go out and implement it. That's how it works. And that's why I think when Marty was talking about it's the NHL, if you can't do it, your ice time will go down, or if you can't do it, you won't be playing in the NHL anymore. It varied, but basically was pretty absolutist about it. Like this is the standard, and if you can't meet that standard, then maybe you're playing in the wrong league, I think is what he said.
Yeah.
So that's
But you need your best player at least to apply, to follow up on that message and apply what he's asked, because the bottom of your lineup, you can say, well, if you don't do the job, somebody else will for you. But you cannot take the guys higher up in your lineup and
exactly.
tell them the same thing. So it's important that at least the leaders on that team show the way, independently of what the coach is saying.
Well, no, not independently of what the coach is saying. In line with what the coach is saying. I mean, they need
Yeah, but I
to,
mean, it's not. It's just that what I'm saying is, it's not only you need guys like Suzuki or the other leaders and the core players. They have to extend his message, but basically their own actions and their own accountability towards their teammates needs to translate that it's not just the coach that's going to
well,
hammer that message, is going to be them too.
that's literally what Marty said today. It's not just the coach,
Yeah.
which was also a little cheeky in light of everything that's been going on. So it's, for a guy who doesn't listen to a lot of the noise, a lot of his comments today seem directly a direct counterpoint to a lot of the noise that he's not listening to. So
What a coincidence.
yeah, it's a total coincidence. It's weird how his comments like perfectly fit a lot of the criticism he's been getting in the market, almost word for word. So yeah, so it's an interesting time, and I think this is a new side of Marty that we're going to get to learn, and it's going to kind of normalize the relationship between media and coach, and we'll see how that looks. So far,
Yeah.
so good. I thought Freddie was very entertaining. I encourage you all to go watch his avail. There was some good stuff in there.
There were people in the room, some guests from they were volunteers from the Montreal Canadiens Foundation,
Hmm.
and at the end, I was just chatting with a couple of them, and they were saying, "Oh, it's interesting. First, it's impressive to see him live because we see him on TV, but to be in the room and all that, and to see you guys ask you questions and all that, it's very interesting. It's you get to see things from a different angle."
Yeah.
And I said, "Yeah, but no matter how we frame our questions or what we say, anyway, the fans are going to hate us no matter what." So it gave them a big chuckle because we
Yeah.
know that ultimately the media is not going to win. Arpin, is it time for Future
It's
Friday?
time. It's Friday. It's Friday. We
Okay,
got it. It's time.
let's do it.
Future Friday.
Okay, so from the University of Michigan, Michael Hage.
Michael Hage. So Michael Hage was promoted to the top line of the Michigan Wolverines. Last game, it turned into a 4-0 loss, but still, despite that, he's rolling along at 7 points in 6 games. A little story about Michael Hage. It's nothing big, but so I was in Boston for the second game of the season against the Bruins. And since basically the entirety of the Canadiens organization is based in Boston, there were people from the organization at the game. And I ran into someone from the scouting staff, and I mentioned, like your entire fan base has like its eyes on Russia right now. They're barely watching this team. They're watching the kid in Russia more. And he just turned to me before walking away and said, they should be pointing their eyes towards Michigan. And I was like, that's not a knock on Ivan Demidov, of course, but it was just a sign of how excited the organization, the scouting staff is about the fact that they got Michael Hage with the 21st pick and this start with Michigan. So I watched a couple of his games so far. He's looking like the version of himself that we saw in the second half of last season, and that the Canadiens kind of fell in love with, and I think it's easy to forget everything this kid went through last year. and how it could have impacted his performance in the early part of the season. Um, I feel like what we're seeing now is someone who's able to play with less of that emotional burden. You never forget the death of your father. Obviously, it impacts you for a long time, but no, I think we're seeing a player who's emotionally able to invest himself fully into his game, and it looks very, very promising so far.
But do you think that there some scouting staffs might have made the mistake of not factoring this enough? That'd be crazy.
I think so. I don't know. I think he kind of went where everyone. He might have gone a little later than some people thought, but it's not like he was
Yeah.
he didn't drop like massively, and he wasn't taken. Or I think he went kind of right where he was supposed to go. I'm not.
Hmm.
I'm not saying, but
I expected him any rank after 15.
right.
Yeah.
But I mean, no one expected Jet Luchenko to go to the Flyers. It happens, and
Yeah.
I think the Canadiens were very happy. I mean, they had Cole Eiserman went right before. I think they would have been happy with that too. That would have been fine. But the fluidity with which Hage plays the game, the skating is exceptional, and his offensive game has a high floor of intelligence to it. It's really he really seems to be a guy that's just going to fit with sort of the organizational philosophy of a high IQ game, and
Yeah.
so it's very encouraging start. And I'm curious if it keeps going this way. Are we going to see Michael Hage in Montreal at the end of the season? Will this be a one and done in Michigan?
That'd be interesting to see because I mean his speed is in transition. How he carries the puck is dominant. He's not
Mhm.
afraid also to attack the middle. He's not doesn't look like he's a perimeter player.
No.
But what impresses me the most is that the University of Michigan has gone through such a big turnover in their on their roster. I
Mhm.
mean, Gavin Brindley turned pro, Rutger McGroarty turned pro,
Yeah.
Seamus Casey turned pro, Frank Nazar. I mean, those right there are like very, very important pieces on that team.
Mhm.
Not to mention Dylan Duke also, who's playing in Syracuse now. So and in that, so it's a completely different team. And on that new version of the Wolverines, he's really established himself as a go-to guy right from the get-go.
Yeah.
And so it's not usually you can have guys that are going to be very effective, in their freshman year, but they're not necessarily going to be the guy,
Well, those
especially
guys
in the
usually
play.
go at the top of the draft, like
Yeah, and
Macklin
especially a program
Celebrini
like
did that.
yeah, that's true, but that's
Yeah.
Macklin Celebrini.
Well,
And
that's what
now
I'm saying. Yeah. It's
we're
rare. It's
talking about a
rare.
guy. We're talking also about a program that's it's not union. I don't want to disparage.
Everyone,
Any college,
all union
but
alumni, you can reach us on yeah,
you know
BasuandGodin@gmail.com.
that's it.
Yeah.
That's it. But I mean, my point is that in a program that's traditionally as strong as Michigan, to see him come up there and show um, no shame whatsoever in producing. I mean, 7 points
Mhm.
in his first 6 games. He's playing over 17 minutes a night, which is very good too. I don't think that there's any. We're recording this on Friday, and apart
Mhm.
from a 20-year-old guy who's a freshman and he plays for Union, that's why I've got it on top of my head. Apart from that 20-year-old freshman,
Mhm.
Michael Hage is the freshman that produces the most at this point. So
Yeah.
he's just a draft plus one. But do you think that he's still a rather lanky guy? Do you think that he'd be mature enough physically to make that jump after 1 year?
Well, I think he's going to have this entire season to work in the gym. That's the beauty of the NCAA schedule is basically you spend the week in the gym. Obviously, you have practice, but there's a lot of gym time. And then, I mean, if he makes the jump, we're talking about, Michigan's not a real powerhouse this year. I don't know if they're going to play in the Frozen Four necessarily. So you could actually get some runway with him in Montreal. It's going to depend on the Canadian situation, if they are actually quote unquote trademark in the mix or not. But if they're not, and they're kind of playing out the string, then yeah, I don't see. I mean, unless they feel that he needs another year in Michigan. But honestly, if it keeps going this way, what do you want? You want a guy to dominate at the previous level before going up a level. Well, so far it's only 7 games, or only 6 games. I get it, but that's a higher percentage of his schedule than the Canadian schedule. Going back to what Marty was talking about, with it's pretty much more or less 15-20% of their season. Like, so it's promising right now. And yeah, I don't think the physical maturity part, and I doubt if he signs and finishes the season with Montreal, like I doubt he would start next season in Montreal. That would be pretty remarkable. He'd probably spend a year in Laval after and make his way up. But I don't know. I mean, if he continues in this vein and he's a point a game guy as a true freshman on a team that's not overflowing with offensive weapons, so he's basically,
especially at center.
He's basically generating that offense himself. It's one thing if you're like a benefactor of someone else's play driving, but he is the play driver. Yeah. And when you're the play driver and you're producing on a consistent, listen, he has a long way to go. This does not mean he's going to produce this way all season. It could happen over the course of the season that they decide, okay, he could use another year back in college, especially since, Cole Caulfield went back for his sophomore year, but I think the physical concerns were greater for him than they are for Hage. I think it would be a possibility. I don't know. But I know the Canadiens won't rush him. If they feel he needs more time in Michigan, they will definitely send him back there. But, I'm sure Hage would be happy to join the team at the end of the season. And if he's proven that it's time for him, basically if he continues at the same pace, I don't think the Canadiens are going to disagree with him.
Do you see him representing Canada at the World Juniors?
Yeah, he should. I mean,
there's not a ton of Canadians playing in the NCAA who end up at the World Juniors, but
it's often. But we've seen it. What was it? Christopher Wood, I think, played in the World Juniors. He was at UConn. Am I getting that name right? Is that his name? The Predators pick, the huge guy. Sorry, Matthew Wood, not Christopher Wood.
Okay.
Matthew Wood, who played at UConn, I think he transferred to the University of Minnesota, but he played for Canada at the World Juniors out of UConn. Right. Predators pick. Sorry, Matthew. I got your first name wrong.
He doesn't listen to the pod either.
Everyone listens to the pod. What are you talking about?
Yes, yeah, that's true. All right. So he's going to be a fun guy to follow.
I would think he would be a standout at the World Juniors. I mean, it would be. I can't imagine Hockey Canada would not take him just because he's playing in the NCAA. That was my point with the whole Matthew Wood thing.
Yeah. Okay. All right, buddy. Let's wrap this up. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening or for watching. We remind you that the clock is starting to tick. If you are not yet a paid subscriber to the Basu and Godin Notebook, in November, the one of our 2 episodes a week is going to become a paid episode. So basically, only available to our paid subscribers. So once a week, you'll have one that's free for everybody, but the other one will be only for the paid subscribers. So you can go to BasuandGodin.com and see our different offers when it comes to subscriptions. You can also just follow us on YouTube. We've got our Basu and Godin channel, and that's it. And we're everywhere in every possible social media. We got all the accounts, but except for OnlyFans, and I'm very glad that you did not go forward with that, Arpin, because
I had big plans. I had big plans for our OnlyFans, and Marc-Antoine just reeled me back in and said, "Don't do that." So our next episode on Monday will be our final Monday episode that lives outside the paywall. That's our last free Monday episode. The Monday after, we'll be going behind the paywall. And so hopefully we see a lot of you there when we get there. But there's still one more week where every episode will be free. And even after we go behind the paywall, our Friday episode will remain free for everyone to watch free of charge.
That's it. So have a good weekend, everybody, and we'll talk to you again on Monday. Bye-bye.